Back here in New York, I'm Christine Corrado. With me right now is the CEO at KushCo Holdings, Nick Kovacevich. Nick, great to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. Nick, let's talk a bit about the business. I know you don't actually touch the cannabis plant. You're very much an ancillary type of business. So just give us an introduction.
Yeah, so KushCo Holdings, we are the pick and shovel play on the cannabis industry. We don't actually touch cannabis. We don't produce it, distribute it, or retail it, but we support the businesses that do produce cannabis and brands that are operating in the plant touching side of the industry. So we provide things like packaging, vape pens, empty. We even provide solvents like butane and ethanol that's used as part of the extraction process. And we launched a new division recently of services that are primarily geared toward the CBD operators, but eventually those will be offered to THC as well. So we do a lot of things in and around the space, and we support a lot of companies that are some of the most notable companies in the industry, but we're sort of behind the scenes as a little engine that powers the global cannabis ecosystem.
Well, kind of talking more about really what's going on in the cannabis world right now, we're seeing a lot more states on pause in terms of actually legalizing cannabis because of the coronavirus. Can you kind of talk to me about what's the outlook for the market from a regulatory standpoint?
Yeah, well, I mean, the good news is, we weren't seeing the progress that we really wanted. And what we do know about coronavirus is it's completely upended all systems, and anything is liable to happen now. So that's a good thing. So there's actually an opportunity, I think, for more change. We know that states that had legal cannabis in effect beforehand have rapidly made adjustments to those regulations on the fly, something that would have never been possible pre-COVID. We've seen states that didn't allow delivery all of a sudden now allowing delivery. States that didn't allow curbside pickup now allowing curbside pickup. Even most recently here, states are abandoning the mandatory background checks and rigorous red tape to have employees join cannabis companies because of COVID. So I'm hoping, even though we are hearing reports that, some signatures are having a tough time being collected because of COVID, and maybe progress at the legislative levels is slowed because of bigger focus. I'm hoping that things can actually happen more quickly, and there's going to be an aha moment here very soon where so many people are out of work, so many states' budgets are absolutely decimated, and somebody's going to suggest, hey, cannabis could actually help fix both of those, and they might actually move quicker to get something done. So I'm a little bit more optimistic, but it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Well, what has KushCo really been doing to kind of safeguard itself during the pandemic? I mean, do you have enough liquidity on hand to continue operations?
Yeah, I mean, the good news for us, right, in our industry is that for the most part, it's been deemed essential. So business as usual. And we were very fortunate that we raised some capital in February of this year. So right before the coronavirus, we were able to raise $15 million net of capital. And, we're in a great position. Unfortunately, a lot of other companies that didn't do that have been forced to raise capital during this pandemic, and the terms have been awful. So, we're in a great position to avoid having to go to the capital markets. Obviously, if we needed to get capital, we could as a publicly traded company, but we're not going to like the terms whatsoever. So we're going to do everything within our power to execute with the cash that we have, get this business profitable. We've stripped a ton of costs out of this business. It's been tremendous what our team's been able to do. And people don't really realize this is a completely different business. We were built for growth, and we grew faster than arguably any company in the country the last 5 years. And now we've just changed our mindset to position toward profitability and cost cutting. And, the effects of that have yet to be really broadly seen, although we've previewed it on our last earnings call. So I think people are going to be very surprised with what our company is able to do during this pandemic.
Speaking more about your earnings, your Q2 earnings, revenue from core customers had increased each quarter, which represents 82% of your revenues. What is kind of the strategy here, I guess, moving forward, focusing on these core customers?
Yeah, and this was something we didn't really fully realize the impact to our business. Thinking about, hey, coronavirus and the market still being open, but the biggest impact is actually in the institutional investor market, right, or even high net worth investors, and not so much for us because, like I said, we raised cash. We're a publicly traded company. We have access to cash. but a lot of our customers do not. And so we're servicing thousands of customers that are, quite frankly, their backs are against the wall, right? They're very short on cash. They've got no real way to bring in additional capital. And unfortunately, a lot of these companies are, probably going to have to go out of business. And so we were sort of left there as a provider of products with exposure, because we've got credit terms, we've got inventory sitting in our warehouse with their brand on it. And so we made the strategic decision. It was a very difficult decision, but ultimately the right decision, to move away from what we call our legacy customers and embrace our core customers. And as you mentioned, the good news is that core customer group has been growing quite tremendously for us over the last year. So we've put ourselves in a position to make that transition. It does a few things. Number one, it completely de-risks our receivables. We recently had to write off some bad debt, so we got that out of the way. But going forward, we're now only giving credit to what we believe is our core credit-worthy customers. These are most of the publicly traded cannabis companies that you hear about. So we're feeling very good about that. It's also put us in a position where we could do more with less. We don't need the army of sales force that we had. We don't need all of these warehouses and warehouse workers. We've been able to actually cut costs because we're now focused around a smaller group of customers. And in reality, it takes about the same amount of time to pull $1 million order as it does a $100,000 order. And so we're actually able to be much more efficient under this new program too. So we're very excited. We're getting deeper and stronger relationships with the customers that really matter and the customers that we see as being the long-term winners. And we are going to forego a little bit of revenue from that legacy group, but we think it's worth the impact of that, given all of the positives coming from the strategic shift.
But with these core customers, with these large publicly traded cannabis companies, the stock price seems to be down, but demand seems to be up. So what is the disconnect here?
Well, one of the greatest disconnects I've ever seen, I think if people have dug in, probably one of the greatest disconnects you'll ever see. And this is what we're talking about here, is the fact that cannabis since last summer has been on a downward trajectory when it comes to the stock performance and the market caps of publicly traded companies. And in fact, as we sit here today, many companies are at or near their all-time lows, including our company. We're trading below what we ever traded, and we've been public since 2016, and we've only grown the business. So where's the disconnect? The disconnect is these companies are trading really low, us included, and the consumer market is at an all-time high. We're seeing more consumers rush into this category. In fact, when Illinois legalized on January 1st, there were lines 3 times around the block. I had a friend of mine that recently went to a dispensary there a couple months ago, and they had to wait for an hour, and they were limited to 1 gram of cannabis. That was all they were allowed to purchase. And they're probably paying an exorbitant premium to what you would traditionally pay for a gram of cannabis. So the legal industry is booming and sales are booming. And there's a huge, bigger and bigger disconnect happening that eventually smart investors will figure out and take advantage of when this thing fully swings, because as we know, these disconnects, especially in the public markets, they don't typically last too long.
Well, Nick, it was really great to hear your insights on this, and looking forward to speaking again. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you for having me.